Flip switch on. Good deal. Good morning and welcome. This morning's presentation is from Fred. Yeah, go ahead and put that mic on him. Fred Goughler K5LLZ, aka the Rotor Man. I don't know if anybody who's had a rotor repaired here in the Big Norman area. Anybody had one fixed? Anyone need one fixed? Yeah, there's the nods, the hands. Oh, good. We're in the right spot. Why is your wife raising her hand about needing a rotor fix, Fred? Today's presentation is going to be on rotators. All of us old guys used to call them rotors, but I think now the official term is rotators. This is what sits on top of your antenna stack and turns the pieces around. As a young kid, I was the guy that always had to go around and turn the TV antenna to go from Chicago to Milwaukee. So I guess I was called rotor is probably the right way to say that. Armstrong, yeah, that's right, Armstrong rotor. So is he on, Ken or Mark? Okay. We're going to talk about rotators. Fred's been doing this. He's pretty new at it. He's been doing it for what, 50 years, something like that. So you're about to get it right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. He's got a little bit of experience. I'm the guy that will take the case apart and I can make the ball bearings fall all over the floor, just everywhere. And you always miss one of those little ball bearings, right? And they show up when your shop missing a ball bearing, or two or three. Yes, that's a good deal. So now that he's all mic'd up, ready to go, I'll pass it off to Fred. Thank you very much. Nope.
Mute. There we go. Leave it to us, an old sound guy to mute a mic. It's the first time I've ever done a forum, seminar, or whatever on rotors. Give me sound, guys. Give me sound. I've done microphones and amps and all of that to different churches and stuff, but I'm glad to be here in Norman today, just down the road from the big stadium. How many have seen me at the Ham Fest in Oklahoma City, Enid, Green Country, Joplin? Yeah. I didn't know about that until about a week before or so. But I got interested in electronics, give you a little bio of me, when I was in the 9th grade in woodshop class. Yep, and right on my instructor's desk was an old Allied catalog. How many remembers Allied electronics? And how many remembers the old night kits? Well, I got looking at that thing and just drilled all over the night kit star roamer, which I got a picture of right there, of a shortwave radio. There it is. And talked to instructor, let me take catalog home, talked dad into helping me buy it, and we built it. And it worked. First time we had ever done anything like that. None of us knew anything, the difference between a resistor and a capacitor at that time. Dad had a big old welder soldering gun, and that's what we soldered it with and stuff. So that got me interested and sparked the rest of my life in electronics and radios. Through that star roamer, I got to listen to all the different shortwave bands and ham radio. On Sunday mornings for church, I don't get to do it like this sometimes when I get the little heart down to heart. But listen to the hams in the corner, because I grew up in Barnsdall up there north of Skytook, where I live now. And the four corners there, the hams will get around on Sunday mornings, is on the AM side, will give their weather and everything in that deal. So I listened to that before church on Sunday, then at Four Corners. Sparked my interest in ham radio. But I never had anybody around me that was any hams in that town. So for Christmas one year, I got a set of walkie-talkies. And on that star roamer, I had hooked a wire up between the house on one end to the other and come in on a wire, which I didn't know at that time was my start on Wyndham antennas, but I came down with that lead down there. And so I had my brother take off on the bicycle and go on one side of the town, and I take that wire that I had off of that antenna for the shortwave and tie it to that walkie-talkie and get more range across town and everything out of the walkie-talkie. So that's where I started getting my interest in trying to get out. For graduation, yes, I did start on the CB, the chicken band or the children's band, for about 20 years. That got me sparked into antennas. Yeah, antennas and rotors, tower climbing, setting up other people's stations and everything for about 20 years. I was working at McDonnell Douglas at that time, and I got to meet an old boy. His name was Gene Joins. I got a picture of him up here. He had been a ham about as long as I had been breathing. And he helped me learn my code. He told me when I started talking to him, he found out my interest in radios. He said, I'm going to get you off that children's band. So he made the cassettes. I had a little battery operated cassette I'd set in the car as I went to work, and I'd listen to code at 5 words a minute. And he made me another tape of all the different explanation points and all that other put in there. So during one lunch break, one time, him and another ham, WA5RAU, which is silent key now too, which we always called WA5 rats are ugly and everything, but they gave me my 5 words a minute test on my code right there in 30-minute break time. Then he got me into a ham radio school that the TRC club there in Tulsa had on Friday nights. Me and a friend, we got in and got our novice, our tech, and our general tickets all by January 1991. So after that, I sold all my CB stuff, antennas and everything, but I kept my Ron tower. And then between all that time we were doing all this, I worked on my own rotors, some for friends that came around. Some of them I picked up extra and sold for a little bit of money. Then I retired from Spirit Aero Systems. Between McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, and Spirit, I had about 40 years into making airplane parts, repairing airplanes and stuff. So that's where I got my start. And you was talking about the difference between rotors and rotators. If you ever seen my Facebook page, I got a little thing on that and stuff, but there's a kind of like, I got my little text here I had. Is it a rotator or a rotor? Hams are not very precise with slang or jargon, so both words are used referring to the same thing. A device that aims an antenna in a specific direction. Nevertheless, there's a proper usage. A rotator is a device that raises something to rotate. In the case of mast and antenna attached to it, a rotor is a part of the device that rotates, such as a rotor shaft or armature. So this writer says if you want to be correct with referring to the gadget, then use aim your antenna in it's called a rotator. Well, if you read my little Facebook site I said, it's kind of like tomato and potato, whether it's tomato and stuff and everything. If I was going to be a true colonist, I'm going to butcher the King's English and call it a rotor, because that's all I've learned for over 50 years. It's always been called rotors. But you can call it a rotator if you want to, but short term is rotor. Yeah, you can fight over which one you want to use. But why was rotors invented? It wasn't invented for us hams to start with. Television. And it started back in 1926 in Japan, between two people named Yagi and Yuta. they started making or developing the Yagi antenna back then. It really didn't take off a whole lot, but then both sides, the Allied and stuff, used it in World War II for their radar planes and radar. So that's why you sometimes see on some of these old airplanes back then, they used for radar and everything, they've got them either pointed horizontal or vertical polarization there. When us Ham-Ms started using rotors, we had the old Armstrong method. This is one of them here. I took this off a Silent Key. He had this in a 2-story house. And okay, he had that in a 2-story house and a 50-foot push-up pole going up through the dead spaces, turned a 3-element beam and a log periodic 2-meter with it. Just pull that pin and use that little steering wheel. The other methods used to be the pipe wrench outside the window, turn the pipe. Or I have seen in some of the old ARRL handbooks for the antennas and everything, they had a pulley up there because towers were first made out of wood and everything. They had the lattice towers all spaced up and everything, or the old type of windmill towers. And old Ham told me here the other day that he had a friend that used to have a steering wheel outside the window right there, and had a pulley up the top, and he turned his rotor. That was his rotor there, turning it that way and everything. But then the TV rotors started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's when they started out making all different kinds of TV rotors there and stuff. And these were some of the first bell type rotors that high gain, well, CDR started making and stuff. That was the early type of rotors before all of these ever came around. So, and then they had all different kinds. I got pictures of all different kinds of rotors there and stuff, of all the CDRs, and just keep on scrolling through. You can see all the different type of antennas that they made. And that was some of the ones that CDR made. That was their first one right there, like that one. And the old AR-22. Some of you remember the old clickers that you used to turn, and they go click, 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 ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. We always called them. And you can see they had all different people and different makes. There were a lot of little companies come out making little rotors and stuff of all different kinds of TV rotors there. So that's what got started in the rotor business, was the TV rotors. Then the Ham-Ms started using them for their little beams and everything. It turned their little beams. But then everybody wanted to start getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they started out with probably about the 12-foot beams, 11-foot beams, going all the way up now to 40 feet or more and everything. So the little antenna rotors started going. But we had fun back in the 40s. Ron Towers started making towers. But you didn't see the 20s and 25s and bigger until the late 50s, when the 20 and 25s started coming out. Then they started getting bigger for the commercials, and then the Ham-Ms started wanting them and everything. So that's how we involved in all of the rotors and everything. Then we come up with the medium-sized rotors, which was these here. And I think I got some other pictures. Just keep on strolling through there. The medium-sized rotors, this is an old TR-44. And there was some others that came out along about that time too. There was Alliance came out and everything. That's the first Ham-Ms started coming out in 1958. Was when the Ham-Ms started coming out. That was one of the first catalogs, or the first manuals they had right there. So they started coming out in 58. The medium-sized rotors, they all came out. Kinbro came out with a rotor. There was, let's see, there was, Wilson had some out too, some of theirs. They're big ones there, but everything. But so Kimbrough and Alliance. Alliance was a big TV rotor place, and then they came out with the HD73, which I had a picture of HD73 in there too. They was all medium-sized rotors. They didn't have a brake in them. They had a friction brake, but that was about it. The high gain started coming out with a little friction brake inside the motor and everything, but that's about the only brake you had. The Ham-Ms started coming out in '58. So that was because of us Hams wanted the braking system, because our beans were getting bigger and we didn't like that turning all the time and having to go back and recalibrate our rotors. So they obliged us coming out with the Ham-M. And it was a smaller one. In size, it was the same size. That's the very same about inside as the other ones, except they improved a bunch of stuff in there down the ways. But it would only handle, I think, about 7.5 square feet, about as much as that old 44 does, until the Ham-2s and stuff started coming out. They had a little trouble with them inside the rotor box and stuff, so they came out with a different one on those. But they started out getting bigger rotors. We saw that one on that one. And they said AG might have made that one right there, that same one as that Wilson 5000. Wilson, somebody, I can't remember, somebody else bought Wilson antennas and everything. They made ham antennas and CBs and stuff. Some of them bought them out. Then you don't see them anymore except if you buy them from there, the big ones. So, and then Kimbrough got bought out by Yazoo along the way. So that's where Yazoo started out of the Kimbrough. If you look at them, they're about all the same thing, kind of like the old Alliance rotor there too, was plugged in that way. So that's what got started on all the Hams. And they needed bigger and bigger brakes and everything. So the braking system was important because of all the big rotors. We didn't like seeing our big Hams radio antennas sitting around or windmilling around and everything. So they came out with the bigger rotors and better rotors. The Ham-4, the Ham-M, they did it into a Ham-2, and then they went into the Ham-3. The Ham-2 improved a little bit. Then they went to the Ham-2 box and everything. The reason why they went, you see that brown box right over here. The reason they went to this was because you remember the old plastic ones, like that one I had in the picture there. You just had that little, I don't know how many of them little switches going back and forth I wore out over the years and everything. But I kept wearing them out and stuff. So I read somewhere down the line, they quit making those plastic ones and went to these metal ones, which is the brown and this color here, because they had a fire wherever they made them and it destroyed the mode. That was one version I got. Another version is they decided to, because they needed a difference in the brake and everything, was the other reason why. So you can take it either way. You know how the internet is. Then they came out, the Ham-3 came out, and it had a box like this. And it improved the braking system in it. And they had a bigger, harder brake, and it was a wedge type, knife type brake that hit those grooves in there. So they came out with a better system there, and then they came out with the Ham-4. Which is this one right here. This one was a Ham-3, and I made it into a 4. Little do you know, there was no difference at all up here in the 3 and the 4. The only difference is down here. The wedge is different. The brake housing is different. And it's got a steel ring gear now. They did away with that aluminum cast And high gain now, you can't get the aluminum cast because they decided now it's cheaper. They can get the stainless steel made, or the steel one made over the aluminum cast. But I've still got about 30 of those aluminum rings there at the house that I've tore down other rotors and got. Little did you know that there hasn't been a whole lot of change since the ATR22 and the TR4s came out. Because you could take some of these parts off of this. I wouldn't use the bale because I don't think the bale's as heavy as these are. But this little part right here, you see right here, I'll get in the camera. That's the same one they're still using today. That part there, that's the same one. Fits on the bottom of this. That's the same part. After 50 some odd years, that's the same part. And this part right here is the same. It's used in the old TV rotors, the TR44s. It's used in the Ham-Ms, and it's about used in this one right here. So there hadn't been a whole lot of difference, but the insides have all changed and everything. So high gain has improved on the ring gear, on the potentiometer has changed. It's better now. The limit switches now have gone from the old reed type they had to micro switches. So high gain, needless to say, everybody puts MFJ down, but they've improved the high gain rotors. I don't have much to say about their other stuff, either yay or nay, but I do know they have improved the rotors. I know they've come out with a pulsating rotor. I got to talk with them sometime whenever I get into talking to them about parts and everything, to send me some stuff on their new literature on the new pulsating rotors they've got out. Did away supposedly with the potentiometer. So they've improved it a lot. The Tailtwister has improved a lot too. Oh. It's heavy as it all can be, but would you believe the same stuff is in the Ham-M is in here? The only difference is this casting, and the brake part and everything. And you got another set of bearings right here. But that goes up to 20 square foot inside a tower compared to 15 for the Ham-M. So you got better braking system in it, and it's heavier, made for the bigger antennas. And that's what I got on both my towers. It'll sit up there and turn my 442 meters and stuff around just like that, compared to what it does in my bigger tower. But one thing I got to say, you can't mount that Tailtwister inside a RON 25. And I do not like people cutting the braces off their towers to put one in. When you cut that brace, you weaken that tower. Yeah. So you weaken that tower. I've seen people cut their RON towers out to put a bigger rotor in, but that weakens that right there. I've seen it. I've seen somebody had it about a 10 foot, and next thing I knew, the tower twisted and came down. So don't mount them. Yeah. So then you get into the ring gears. I've got pictures of the tick rings and stuff. Towers. There's one right there. They mount that around the tower, and you mount your beam in that, and you can turn that beam. That's a lot of the contesters use those things on the big contest. They'll mount a 20 meter, 15 meter, 10 meter beams, and you can have all the different sizes. They've got it down up to what sizes they need. Got some more pictures in there too of some tick ring rotors. There's one big one right there, and where the motors are on right there. So all the big contesters and stuff, they use them where they want to mount different antennas and everything, so they can run their contest on different towers. So you can kind of get examples of those. And there's some people that want to rotate the whole tower with a prop pitch motor or whatever. I got some pictures of that one in there. And what they do is they take that ring and they make it to where the tower spins inside that ring and they can guide off that ring. So they guide off that ring and the tower just turns inside there, and they've got them antennas mounted up the side of the towers the way. So, I wished. My neighbors probably wouldn't be, but so that's how they get by doing that. So they got, there's that prop pitch motor type that turns the whole tower. It's going to take quite a bit of concrete to hold that. I don't know. I had never got into that part yet. There's a big old prop pitch. That's what Ham started with back in the 50s, taking those prop pitch things off the old airplanes and using them for rotors and stuff too, to turn their big stuff. One thing about it is, where do we set our rotors inside the towers? Me, I don't like them sitting up there close to the top of the tower. If you don't believe it, just sit up there and watch your big antennas turn. And since when that brake engages and you're sitting there watching that tower, that just weakens it, especially in freestanding towers too. I like mine, I got mine down on that RON 55 at the first section down at 10 foot with the TB3 bearing at the top. Then that tower is not shaking like this when it stops. Of course, I got mine, I like my controls on a brake delay. So when it turns, it takes about 5 seconds or so before that brake hits. If you ever watched your tower, if you don't have it, that brake, when it hits and it jams, it goes like this. Ron used to make, or was making, and then they decided they quit making those torque arms that came out the sides of the towers that took that torque out. Well, I learned a long time ago, they quit making them for a while until the Ham-Ms started hollering about it, and they started making them again for their towers, but that takes that torque out, them torque arms and stuff. So it takes a lot. If you sit up there and watch some of these commercial towers, they got these big old round antennas on them, they pick up a lot of wind. You usually see them down a little lower and everything. So you got to watch it when you get up there too high, that wind load and everything. It's going to sit there and rock that tower back and forth, back and forth. And it slowly just weakens, takes the tower's taking the stress of everything. So you got to watch that too when you get up there, and you got to watch when you get your wind loads on these towers and antennas too and stuff. And you get your wind load stuff off of your antennas, and then you got your wind load made for the for the rotors and stuff, and then your mast figures in too. DX Engineering's got formulas in there, a chart you can go through. You can put all your antennas and wind loads on that, your wind load of your rotor, and they got the mast and everything, how high it is and heavy and everything that figures up. When I got to figuring mine up the other day on mine, I'm right at the max, probably close to what my tail twister is at 20 square foot of what I got on my big tower, which I've got an old Pro 67, the first one Mosley put out before the warp bands. Above that one, I got that 2-element 40 that Mosley makes, the little shorty. Then above that, I got a homemade 17 and 12 meter 3-element beam. So on a 2-inch pipe. So I got it up there. It's a 50-foot tower, and I got it down 10 foot. So I got about 10 or 11 foot just above it with those 3. And I pretty well got that RON 55. I don't have to worry about that 55 going anywhere, and it's solid. So, but I'm right at the max with my rotor. That's what they say. And that solenoid on high gain, they got the 2 larger of the 8 conductor wires go to your brake system. That carries the most current. That's If you go to your rotor box for 1 and 2, you should get 30, 31 volts. That's what carries that AC voltage going and hitting your solenoid. If you ever sit there and listen to them things, you can hear that brake wham when it goes open and stuff. That's how I can even tell from my ham shack, and I'm under my patio and everything, and it's way out there. I can still hear that tail twister clicking. So I know it's a working. But that whams back, and so you know if you let that go without a brake delay, when you stop, that wham. That's why I put mine on about a 5-second delay board inside of the control box, so it comes to a stop, and then it stops on the wedge. Because if you don't, sometimes it's gonna rock sometimes, especially if you're going with the 3 things and you happen to get your hand off that thing and that brake closes in there. That's especially when you're about halfway through. That's not too good on that brake system inside on the deal. I have seen the old Ham-Ms M3s, and I've had one go, and it just sat there and turned all the way inside and wore out all them grooves inside that wedge and everything. And then I had a buddy of mine give me his old Ham-Ms one time. When I tore his down, I figured out why it did that. They make 2 springs in there, fits up against the bottom of that brake housing in there, and it holds that wedge thing down that when it hits and holds that wedge from going back and forth. Well, those 2 springs were gone, so that let that thing flop up and down. So when it got real windy out and everything and it started rocking, it flipped that switch up and it let that thing start spinning. So that's what I always look for when I tear the Ham-Ms down. I make sure those 2 springs are sitting in there when I tear it down. Your rotor ratings, I had a chart in there. That's some different, the bigger rotors that turn. That's the one that DX Engineering has started making there. And you've probably seen High Gain makes an HDR 300. And there's other ones that are made. M Square makes one. And then you always got all these different rotor boxes. Green Heron makes a lot of rotor boxes. There's some more pictures in there of those. They also, your big contesters you see have got rotor boxes that can handle 3 or 4 rotors. And they're big towers and everything that'll handle up to 3 different type of rotors and everything. So Green Heron makes them, and High Gain started making some digital ones and everything, different ones, and they make ones for Yagi rotors. But there's your different type of rotors and all of their different ratings that they have. So you can see the wind, the torque and braking and stuff. These here started coming out in the last few years. They're expensive and everything. And but they've come out one of the ones that you can turn up for your satellites, like the Yazoo rotors and everything. So those are come out. High Gain has started selling these rack end rotors too. So you can tell the difference between it and the little TV rotor here of all the everything. So all different kind of type of brakes they've got coming out now, the disc brakes or the wedge or the worm gears coming out on these. So they got all different types of braking systems, medium, light, and heavy. So they all got different types of rotors coming out. Talked about the wind load, the braking ability, and turning torque and everything. You get these big antennas, you need to know what turning torque you have so you know how much torque it's going to take, that you're going to have enough to turn those big antennas. I know it's going to take a big one if you get one of those Mosley Pro 96 ones. I don't know, a bunch of them have put them up. We already went through controlling. They come back all different kinds. You can get them now for the controllers. You can control them with your computers too. You can hook them up to your RG or whatever it is, 232s deal. Makes them like that. I know High Gain has come out with a DC2 and DC3 that you can hook up to computers. I had never worked on them. I've had them come in the shop and everything, and I've went back through and went through, make sure they're all working and everything. So there's the chart that DX Engineering has. So you can figure up your wind load capabilities and everything. I know I've looked into and I've thought about it. I've got one box there at the house that Idiom Press made that Ham Supply bought. The point and shoot method. Anybody seen those new ones? The point and shoot goes in there and take out the box that the control circuit board that's in the rotors, high gain boxes, and takes it over, and you don't have the calibrating switch anymore. It takes care of that and everything. So you turn that calibration switch over to where you want to point it at. So you're over here and you just take that calibration switch and move it over to that where you want to go and hit that brake, and it'll go and stop. It's got a 5-second, 6-second delay in it, and it'll stop. So it's real easy. I've been thinking about putting them in, starting to put them, wire them up and everything. It's somebody gets the kit already pre-made for me and put it in, but it takes out all of this sitting there. You can go back and do that too, but if you want to hit a station real quick, just go over and hit that calibration, hit the brake, and it turns it over there. So you don't have to sit there and hold that if you don't want to. So wiring them up on the Ham-Ms or all the Ham towers or stuff that High Gain makes, they use the 8-conductor wires. And I always like to use what I can get. I usually order mine from R&L or the Wireman, and I get the 16 for the 2 solenoids and 18 for the others. And I got my other towers got over 100-foot running to it, and I don't have any problems with it. If you're running any more, then they want to get you to step up 200, 300 foot and step up to number 14 for the 2 and 16. But my little gripe about the new High Gain stuff is the cannon plug on the bottom. Everybody wants to quick disconnect up there. Well, if you ever stop and look at it, you got them little pins running to them big wires. That's another way of building up resistance. And I have found through the times, it takes 13 volts to run 7 and 8, and that goes up to the potentiometer. That's DC. And you run them through them cannon plugs, and every time you run it through a plug, that just builds that much more resistance up. So by the time you get up 100 foot or more, how much DC voltage is going to get you getting up to that thing for the resistor? Sure, you're going to get your AC running to hit the solenoid, but are you going to have enough to show you your rotation and everything, or even make it run? That's what I've run into, the connection. I don't mind the Jones plugs that they're putting on the back of the rotor boxes, which makes it nice for an easy, just quick fix when it starts lightening out, just pull it and save your rotor box. Because I have seen lightning, I've worked on them and everything, where it has hit a rotor, it knocks the potentiometer out. I have had one melted, a chunk of it about that much on that plastic around that wire round, and took the motor out. And then I went to working on the box, and there was a nice little black line all the way down the printed circuit board. So that the Jones plug on the back was one neat way. It just, when it yank it out like you do your coax when it lightens and everything, you don't have to worry about your box going. That's the only, but I don't care too much, and they're not very waterproof. Them Jones plugs are not very waterproof. I had a guy from Louisiana just sent me 2 tail twisters. I went through one, and he wanted a cannon plug put on like his other newer one had. So I put it on for him and everything. He's the one that started, that I put in there, the rotor man that helps the hams rotate the world. He gave me that moniker, you might say. So I just told him, I'm going to put that on my website and everything for Facebook. So that's where that came from. Nobody down in Louisiana. I just fixed his tail twisters and up for him. So I had that problem with that one. I had fun putting that one in, but anymore, I used to dread putting those new terminal boxes on the bottom of them until I figured out a little shortcut on that. Then I don't dread it anymore. I'm not sitting there trying to solder with the pulling out and trying to solder them all together. I just take it all out and put all new wire going up through there and everything, so I don't have to do that. So I found some little shortcuts down the way. All right, here's the mounting thing. That's where I get where you can mount it this low, you're going to get this twist in this tower and everything. And other people have problems thinking about how in the world do I tie my rotor or my cables off on a tower with it turning. And some people, how much do I need to make that loop? How big of a loop do I need? So what I do, I go up here and I just tie the tape up there. I tape it up right there. Don't use the cheap Harbor Freight tape or whatever. Use the Scotch tape you can get at Lowe's, the 33s, electrical tape. Some of them other tapes, they get warm in the summer and they come off. And I've always found that Scotch makes about the best electrical tape to do. I'll tape it up all up there, and then I'll come down here and make a loop. And what I do is when I hold it down here, I make that loop and make sure it'll come over to this side and come back over to this side. And I know my loop's good. It's going to clear that 360 degrees around. That's the way I loop it off. I'll use some wire ties through there, but I'll make sure my tape is holding, and I'll wire tie it a little bit better sometimes. But that wire ties too, you might want to get the big, good electrical ones and not the Harbor Freight ones that'll give out. Man, you want black. Black is good for the ultraviolets. So that's what I use all up and down my towers and stuff, holding coaxes and rotor wire and stuff. Besides the tape, is that I use the black, the good zip ties. That's one thing you have figured out. Black is good for the ultraviolet. So if you want your stuff to stay up, you want to use that. So I've gone through a lot of this stuff. I don't know what another thing is I hadn't gone through is when you mount them here, that takes your wind load down and everything. You got more wind load inside the tower than you do out here. Plus, on these, you always got this like here, where you're turning this in here and stuff. On the old high gain dates, on the 44s and the 45s that coming out now, they just put, there's supposed to be 98 bearings in a Ham-4, 2 races. Well, then all the 44s and the 45s, they just put half of one. Every other hole in that thing had a bearing. When I go back and rebuild the 44s, I put bearings all around it. So it gives you that much more capabilities this way, like the Ham-M. The 44 is just like the Ham-M, just don't have a brake. That's the only difference. Just don't have a brake. And they're supposed to handle a little less load than that, but when I go through them, I put all 98 bearings around, so that takes that, it gives it more torque and everything like the Ham-M does. So that's about what I do to them. A lot of people have asked me if I worked on the Yazoo rotors, or I worked on the prop pitch, or if I worked on the tick springs, and I tell them no. No, I don't, because I never have had anything to do with them. But if you go and I know a lot of people, I don't say too much about Yazoo rotors. The only thing I know way back years and years ago was it's hard to get parts for, and they wasn't as good as the high gains. Everything, because a lot of people are bragging about the Yazoos that's got them, they're working, but I've always heard remarks about hard to get parts for. And I had a buddy tear one of the control boxes down. He looked in there and seen all them belts around. He was going to put a new belt on. Then he forgot how he took it apart to put the new belt on and everything. And I just found out it's just a lot easier working on high gain. I can call down there, I can get parts. The only time I've had a hard time getting parts from high gain was the tool that they made their motors with broke. And it took them 3 or 4 months to get another tool and get the motors put out. So that's the only trouble. And then when they had another vendor making their brakes wedges for the Ham-4s, they didn't grind them out right. That's the only time I've had any trouble with high gain. So as far as I know, I'll stick with the high gain repairing them. They're nice and easy. I know how to do them. I've done them for years. And I know all I gotta do is call down there to high gain, talk to Tom down there and get my parts. So I'm about done. Unless anybody got any questions?
Any questions for him over here? Oh,
I've heard endless discussion about whether, like in the third example where you have a truss bearing, whether the rotor should carry the weight of the antenna array, or whether the rotor should essentially float and the truss bearing should carry the weight of the antenna array.
What I do is
Hang on, let me repeat the question.
Okay.
Question is on the right side of the screen, should the thrust bearing carry the weight or should the rotor carry the weight of the antenna?
let the rotor free. I put my weight on the bearing. I put it about the mast about a ½ inch above the top of the rotor. And I let all that weight sit right there. Then all this is that way, if you ever have rotor problems, if you take it off, the weight of that bearing is holding that thing. That way you can take that rotor out and shove another one in. You don't have any problems. Over here.
Well, you talked about the design of the rotor and the design of how the mast and the bearing, but is there labor that will actually go up and work on the mast so that you can get these parts down and redo them?
Question is there somebody that'll go up and down the mast to fix these rotors?
You got a tower climber.
Are there a crew of tower climbers around?
I don't know. I know in the Tulsa area and stuff, I don't know whether you heard of him or not. He's Silent Key now. Johnny Renfro, N5XQK. He started the ham rescue. I'm part of it. We got a whole bunch of hams, young ones and all that. We go around helping other hams that can't get up there. We hadn't had any tower climbers since Johnny died and stuff. So, well, if you can find somebody young, I used to do it, but my wife don't like me too good again.
There is a company called Top Hand Tower. They're professionals. They will charge you real money. But they will do it.
Yeah, Kim Elmore said there's a company in town called Top Hand, and there are hams around that will help with those kind of things to do tower climbing locally.
I had one question over here. Anybody else got any questions?
Check with the online.
You had your,
I had a question. So these are pretty good size rotors, meant for good size antenna loads. Does anyone make a really small rotor that would work really well for like a fiberglass push-up?
Looking for a small rotor for a push-up mast.
well, the old 44s, which they got 45s will work. And you can put these adapters on the bottom of them. And that'll work for your poles. And they'll go right in the bottom of your 44s and your Ham-Ms. They make a heavier one if you're going to use it for the tail twister. It's a heavier, beefier one. So that's how you can make it go on a pole. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you have a push-up pole, you're not putting a very heavy antenna up there, you sometimes get away with TV rotors.
Yeah.
TV rotors can be used for statement was TV rotors can be used for push-up poles.
Talked about the technology we've got to use with the potentiometers. And I don't know what kind of motors, are there stepper motors, digital available, or the same technology essentially they've been operating on like 15 years.
Yeah, but they've improved the rotors. They made them beefier and heavier, and they've got a friction gear in there now. You can feel it when you're sitting there turning it.
Stepper motors with digital control that would give you precise measurement and let you have a lot of features. I don't know if you need them when using stepper motors.
I don't know whether they are or not. I had another one right in here somewhere.
It's, you ask questions about stepper motors. Is that pulsar motor, what you're talking about?
Could be.
Is that a stepper motor?
I don't know how, I hadn't got with High Gain yet on those. I gotta get with them and figure that out before I ever get one in there, and I don't know what to do.
I just have a comment about power. I have an HDBX 48 power, which is pretty modern, but the worst thing about it is it's got X brake. It is just very uncomfortable to climb. And so don't forget about the fact that you can go to a crane company and you can have them put a man basket on the crane. And they will lift you up to your tower, to the top of your tower, where you can do whatever you want. Again, it's not free, but that's one way to do it without climbing the tower. How much they charge?
Kim says there's a man basket you can put on a crane to make that happen instead of climbing a tower.
From the rental company, it'll go up to 60 or 70 feet. Best way to do that is rent it on a Friday afternoon. You get to keep it all weekend.
Yep.
They only charge you a day. That's usually a couple of $100 a day. I don't know what the cranes cost. It depends on how big they are. And you have to remember, they have to still get it into your yard. And they're not real light.
I know there's a boom truck guy that owns a big old boom truck. And my son-in-law talked to him here several years ago at a filling station, and he was charging $250 an hour. And he was lifting the big pools and setting pools down or doing whatever with his big booms. So he was charging $250 an hour to go out and for his boom to do anything. Yes.
I follow the patterns. I can't imagine my wanting to be up 60 feet or whatever. That doesn't help.
You can't imagine what?
Working on my antenna, it's not just a matter of climbing out, it's a matter of being up there.
Oh, yeah, it's not.
The view from 60 foot is awesome.
It's not for seniors.
When I was younger, I never used the safety belt climbing towers. I always just climb them up there 50, 60, 70 foot, just wrap my leg around there and I'd work up there for several hours doing that. Now, safety belt. And it took me a while to get over that leaning back in that belt. I always, when I first started, I leaned back and I went to grab that tower because I think I was falling. But heights has never bothered me. You can ask the wife. We get up on these tall hills or whatever and just look out. I just like looking. I could climb my tower and I could see the city skyline of Tulsa up there and everything. And sit up there one time, I even climbed up there a little bit and strapped myself a tower and watched the 4th of July fireworks down there at the river. So you got some advantages of being up there and stuff. So so has anybody else got any questions? Have I answered everything what you had in your wanted to do? I've got some right over here. Plenty of them.
That's kind of off. I got an inherited an old rotor called Ken Pro.
Yeah.
I've heard rumors that they should bottom out.
Yes.
Okay. I got one that's big and new in box, so.
Yeah. You usually bought Kim Pro out.
Yeah, like 30 years ago.
Yeah. Allied rotors, they went out of business and all they're making now is controls to raise and roll your garage doors up and down. So that's where Allied has gone to. But High Gain's still around and still kicking.
Any more, Dave?
About this, I have an Alliance HD73. Did I run into problems with parts?
Yeah. The only one I
Alliance
know
HD73.
around might have some be Norm, if you can get him in a good mood from what I've heard. I did read on the internet this week, Katz has gone out of business. He's retiring. And I called him up wanting to see what parts he had for the high gain rotors, and he said, "What parts?" So I've heard pros
So-
and cons, people calling high gain and waiting several months, but I hadn't had any trouble. I don't know.
Where's Norm at?
Norm is down in Alabama, down way somewhere down in there now. He used to be in New York, and a buddy I talked to up there around Washington DC said he sold out to somebody else and they moved it south and stuff. So Norm is in a wheelchair sitting in the beach in Florida from what I've heard. So that's all I know. Does anybody else got anything?
Anybody online questions? I see no movement.
Could high gain still have that there plug with the little wings on the side, those clips?
Yeah, those 9-pin or 8-pin plugs, Jones plugs.
Well, they had little metal clips on the side that you supposed to plug in it and
And those Jones plugs had the cool clips on them to hold them.
well, first rotator I bought was a high gain and that had that plug. But both sides would never catch.
Yeah,
And they had a rubber boot, a shrink rubber boot. Big enough to go over it, but it wouldn't shrink down over around it tight.
yeah.
And where was it, in back east, the big Ham-Ms back east up. Anyway, there was a whole box of them there, the connections. And I told the guy, I tried a bunch of them. And one side would catch, but the other side wouldn't. And I told him, I said, I'll buy a dozen of these if you can get anyone in there to connect up. And he tried quite a few of them there, and then he just done like that and walked off. And I just wondered if they still got that system or they got them to where it would work or what.
I'd only seen the 9-pins without the clips on them. They just push them together. That's the only, our 8-pin Jones plugs. Never have seen one with a clip on it. But I know it,
And anyway, it got my rotator was junk. And so I took it down to Texas to a fellow that works on them down there.
yeah,
And I don't remember his name. But he took it apart, and all the bearings come out on the floor. And he said whoever built it didn't put a one little pinky of grease in it.
Yeah.
Totally dry.
I put lithium grease back in. It's good for hot weather and cold. I can attest to that because when it got down as cold as it did, that big freeze, every guy I had, I got rotors all around in Oklahoma City, Edmond area. They was a turning. My buddies down in Sapulpa was turning. He just bought a Ham-4 off of me. So I always put the lithium grease in.
That company put them together dry.
Nope. But you tear one apart that's been up for several years, it comes out with almost no grease.
Well, these here, it wasn't that old.
Yeah, I know, but if they don't put a whole bunch of it in there a little bit and everything, it will.
He said they was not one little, drop in it.
Yeah,
And I think I finally just traded it to him. He give me a little bit, he's gonna rebuild it. And I bought one of the old that he had built on, rebuilt it.
uh-huh,
What, ACDZ or whatever.
yeah,
And I'm still using it, it's excellent.
yeah. I've torn apart where the grease was just dry as could be, caked up in there and stuff, or you just had just very little grease and you're just wondering how it was turning. So I get them on all kinds of shapes, or I get them all rusty and everything. That's when I will throw everything in a sandblaster and I sandblast them all. I don't have one of the little Harbor Freight. I got a big stand-up commercial model and everything. So I get all the rust pretty well out of it with the sandblaster and everything. That's why that guy in Louisiana had been sitting around since '79. His grandpa, aunt, dad, and uncle, and all used it. It was rusted all up. The ring gear, the bearing holders were just falling apart when I was pulling it out and stuff, so I get them in there and I get them all cleaned up, and buffed up, and they're just like a new one on everything, so. And repaint them, you can see how I get them all repainted and everything, sandblast it, so it makes a lot of difference. Everybody through?
Fred, we appreciate your efforts. You can find him at all the Ham Fests coming up. And there are business cards up front. So if you brought a rotator, bring it on up.
You can see them right here in the OU.
And we'll take a 5-minute break. So run around and have fun.
Thanks, Fred. Me appreciate it.
Thank you. Very good.